Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Now in this guide we're going to take a look at the 10-year anniversary Carina's challenges, the one where Wong is the star of the team. I recently completed this, but instead of doing it as a full guide, I'm going to be breaking this up into a few videos where in this one we're just going to specifically talk about Wong and how his abilities work and how to ramp him up in the Necropolis. Now there are already some really good guides out there. I would love to point you to Grass MCOC, who has a really good guide with like all the fights. But for me personally, like this was the first time that I'd ever used Wong. And while there's a lot of Wong gameplay out there on YouTube, there isn't always an explanation of how his abilities work together and what you should be thinking about as you're ramping him. Obviously, once he's ramped up to the 9 spells, he's like an absolute force to be reckoned with, but I do think that if you don't know what you're doing, you can kind of stumble in the ramp up. And especially for some of the more difficult fights on this path, it is nice to know some tips and tricks. So with that, we're going to get into this. Basically, the video in the background is going to be the Apocalypse, which I soloed. And the structure of this video is first we're just going to go over his abilities. Then we're going to give some gameplay tips on how to ramp quickly. And then third, I'm going to be giving a few extra tips for specific fights on the Titania to APOC path. So do stick around for the end if you want to know like some tips for fighting Arcus and, you know, Cap Sam and some other fights like that that aren't as traditional with him. So anyway, let's get into this. What exactly is the ramp of Wong and why is he so good? Well, essentially he has 3 spells that he can stack up to 3 times. And the goal is to get 3 of each for 9 total, and then basically spam special 2s for the rest of the fight. That's how you play Wong. And the mechanics that you need to know are quite simple. The special 1 places a spell, and the special 2 or 3 refreshes the duration of all the spells. Now the spells last for 14 seconds on base, but if you are running the Wiccan synergy, which I think a lot of people will want to do for this specific challenge, and also for Necropolis in general, because he's a good inverted controls counter, that is Wiccan, you actually get an additional 20%, so they're closer to 17 seconds, which will actually come up and help you a little bit. Now the other mechanic that you need to know is if you end a combo with a light attack, so like a light ending combo, it will swap to the next spell. So at its core, you need to throw special 1s, place the current spell, and then be aware of how much is left on the clock of the current spells so that you can weave in some special 2s and you don't lose your stuff. That's the basics of how to play him. Now, before we get into what the spells do themselves, the other thing that you need to be aware of is called Eldritch Energy. And in this, you can see it's the most left, upper left icon in this video. And, you know, depending on whatever the current spell is, it will be a different color. But that number that goes up to 100 is your Eldritch Energy. And the key with this is it builds up over time in various ways. Obviously, faster the more spells you have, and some spells enhance it. We'll get into that. But charging a heavy attack will make you unstoppable and will burn this energy to give you power. Now, if you're at 0 power and you have 100 Eldritch Energy, you can actually get all the way past a special 2. So it's just good to have in your head knowledge of like how powerful this power gain can be, and just know that essentially you can go from 0 to yellow bars if you have 100 quite easily, and from there it just kind of scales relative to that. Now the real nuance comes from knowing when it's safe and appropriate to throw the heavy and how to do all that stuff. Now you don't need to always chain the heavy attack into a special, but note that if you are unstoppable from this effect, that your special 2 during the unstoppable will also be unblockable, making it all the more easy for this thing to connect. The other thing to notice is that if you proc the unstoppable, it will actually go on a cooldown, so it's not always available, and you do need to be aware of that. Now before going on, let's actually talk about the spells themselves. They are color-coded and they have names, but I feel like nobody knows the actual names. They just go by the colors, so let's start with that. Now, orange spell is the default first one, and this first of all gives you physical resistance, but more importantly, it gives you Eldritch Energy when hitting the opponent. So instead of just the normal 1 per second that you get, on base, you actually get more from hitting the opponent, and it will help you ramp faster. Now, Wong has very low physical resistance, so these will absolutely help him with his defense. It'll basically make his defensive in line with what a normal champ would feel like in terms of the physical resistance, and it will absolutely help with everything else in his kit by increasing the amount of energy that you build. So for most fights, I would recommend starting with this spell just because it's easier to gain power, and also you'll get your physical defense up early. Now the green spell, in this game, green usually means regen, and that is also the case here. It gives you the ability to instantly regen health from energy damage that is dealt to you, and it also will heal you for a small percentage of the damage dealt as energy to the opponent. Now it's a very, very small amount, so what you really need to be thinking about is how can you increase the amount of energy damage you're doing, and we'll get into that as well. So now I will sometimes start with this spell if I'm going up against a lot of energy damage, whether it's something like the Arcus in Necropolis, because he's going to be cold snapping you and his special 2 hits really hard as energy. So, you know, if you have to block an annoying energy special, that's a good thing to have. Additionally, you get actually more Eldritch energy when you take this energy damage, so it can actually be a way for you to ramp faster. But either way, this spell is very important. You got to build it up. It will keep you at a very, very high amount of health once you're fully ramped, and it also relies a little bit on the blue spell to get its full potential. So let's also talk about that. Third, we have the blue spell, and this is essentially your damage spell. Each hit will now deal a burst of energy damage, and this means that this ability will also feed the regen on your special 2. So now think about this. When you have all 9 of your spells up, each spell will also increase your attack to its absolute peak. So when you're at 9, it's at its peak. Plus, you get a big energy burst off of all the hits, especially the massive last hit of the special 2. And that energy red damage from these blue spells, you can regen off of that so that the special 2 can be a massive source of healing for you once you have all the green and all the blue. It's enough to keep you basically topped off for the entire fight. Then, in addition to the damage increase, the blue spell does one more thing. It allows you basically to punish buffs. You go unstoppable when they get a buff, and then you also gain more energy when they start to trigger buffs. So in a buff-heavy matchup, some people will actually prefer to start with the blue spells. You can kind of see the theme here. It's like, how will you get the most Eldritch energy as fast as possible? If you're blocking a bunch of energy damage, start with green. If you're going up against a lot of buffs, you can start with blue, but in most scenarios, you're just going to start with the orange and be totally fine. Now, briefly, let's talk about the Sig ability and why this can help you in general, but particularly for the trap node that comes up against this Apocalypse path in Necropolis. First off, you get a pre-fight ability. I love a good pre-fight ability. I almost always choose orange as my first spell, and the reason for this is because right out of the gate I like getting more Eldritch energy faster, and this can have an enhanced duration. It starts at Sig 1 at 14 seconds, which is what a normal spell would have, but it can actually go up to like almost double that. So the higher the Sig, the longer you can hold on to this enhanced buff at the beginning. And if you can, try to keep this first spell up. You can see throughout this video that the sort of darker orange one that is on the very, very far left, I've been able to keep that up the entire time. It just makes your ramp easier, one less special one to throw. But because you're starting at 0 power, it can sometimes be easy to fall off. The other thing is indestructible buffs and immortality buffs are instantly nullified, and they deal a burst of damage. And, you know, when you have something like blue spells up, this will basically trigger the buff. It will also trigger Mystic Dispersion, give you a burst of power, give you a burst of Eldritch energy. And the reason this is important is the trap node for Apocalypse basically will give all these indestructible buffs that will just be feeding your kit, absolutely. And if you do have a duped Wong, then this path will be that much easier. But do note that is part of the duped ability, so not every Wong will be equal in this case. So anyway, now that we've talked about all of his abilities, let's talk about the general play style. And with this, the video is actually going to go back to the beginning so you can see a little bit about the ramp as I'm talking about it. So the general play style, ultimately, it's up to you how risky you want to play and how fast you want to ramp. So what I mean by that is the simplest way to play him is to throw a special 1 for the spell, alternate straight into the special 2 just so you have plenty of uptime. And if you don't want to do any like risky heavy maneuvers, it's absolutely possible for you to just play this way, alternating specials. It just means more time is going to pass where you're not ramped, and the chances of soloing the fight are going to be a little bit less. We saw with this Apocalypse that he barely got into the second set of the Ankh charges before he went down. I think I could have soloed him even if I did a much slower ramp up, and it would have been a lot safer. But in general, what I want to talk to you about is sort of an alternate play style where you're being a little bit more aggressive and finding places to charge these heavies so that you can get off more specials before you have to throw the special 2s and the ramp goes faster. So here's some tips. Charging a heavy after baiting a special into the air will still give you power, and you don't have to necessarily connect that to anything. So you'll notice that there are times where I'm just charging it in the air, you go unstoppable, so you have a little bit of a safety net, and then, you know, if you're over a bar of power, you can dash back and intercept with a special 1 right after, and that can be the way that you build your next spell. So one of the biggest pitfalls that I think people try is like, if I'm going to charge my heavy, I need to connect it to a special, but you absolutely don't. Finding any which way to charge your heavy a little bit, gain a little bit of power, get over a bar of power so you can throw another special 1 or another special 2 is a great way to speed up the ramp. Now, the other thing is utilize the unstoppable duration of right before throwing a special 2 so that if you don't connect it, you can still go unblockable. And what I mean by this is like a cool technique is basically if you charge your power so that it goes over 2 bars, but the opponent is far away, you could immediately throw your special 2 and then whiff on the first 2 hits and then hit them with the rest of the special 2. But try this, if you actually hold down heavy, go over 2 bars, the unstoppable will last a little bit longer, and then you can dash in, basically cancel your dash before you hit their block into an unblockable special 2, and then you'll be right next to them and all the hits will hit. So again, you can charge and then maintain the unstoppable so that you can get closer to them and get all of the special 2 to connect. That will be a lot more damage. And lastly, the other thing is just know that once you're ramped, you have this massive regen. So any of the risks and chip damage that you took early on, if you know that you're going to regen it all back later, it doesn't hurt as much. So you may not want to start at very low health if you're going to be this risky, but if you start at full health and you're just throwing heavies all over the place, even if you make a couple mistakes, take some damage, it's not that bad for 2 reasons. First of all, you're probably unstoppable, so the amount of damage you take after will be significantly less. But even more so, just know that you got that regen later so you can make up any of that chip damage and potentially finish with a full yellow bar. So once again, just know that the heavy is an extremely powerful tool, that you have lots of safety nets, and it is okay to play a little bit risky so that you get to that golden 9 spells earlier than you would if you just alternated special 1, special 2. However, if you like playing safe and you don't mind using like 1 revive instead of soloing it, a rank 2 Wong 7-star can absolutely just take the fights playing a lot safer, getting to your ramp, you know, a few minutes in instead of like 30 seconds in. Now anyway, let's talk a little bit about some specific fights on this path. Now Titania I use Chi-Elth on, but Wong is absolutely possible to use for that. Basically everything we talked about here just comes to fruition there as long as you watch out for her haymakers. But the first one I really want to talk about is Arcus. Now I mentioned you want to start with orange for the most part. For this one, I would still start with orange as my pre-fight so that my basic hits are giving myself more Eldritch energy, but I would almost immediately do a light ending combo to switch to green so that with my special ones I am going with the green. And the reason for that is because you are going to get the cold snap on you, you are going to be blocking special 2s which do some massive energy damage, and knowing that will sort of help you ramp, will help you regen some of that damage. If you get the 3 green up early, you're close to invincible from all the threats of this fight, except for the special 3 itself, obviously. Now the other thing is he has a fate seal off of his own special 3, which means if things are getting out of hand and Arcus has low enough power and you get to special 3 and he's got all 5 of his power gains, those will all go away, and then it will just be a little bit easier to deal with his power gain. So I will tell you that when I was going up against Arcus, I did throw the special 3 a few times to get that fate seal. It's just you do get special locked right after throwing the special 3 based on his nodes and the way that all interacts. So you do need to be kind of passive right after that, but it is a very powerful tool to just get rid of all those buffs. Now next up, we're going to kind of skip around and go to Psycho Man. This was probably the most annoying Wong fight for me, and it's because of the ability reduction on the concussions. So basically, when he's yellow, when he's got his yellow cube up, it means that your specials ability accuracy will be heavily reduced, and obviously throwing specials is the bread and butter of Wong. So you basically want to never throw a special when it's yellow, and the way that you get rid of yellow and move on to the next color is to get above a bar of power. So that means if you're in green bar of power and you see the yellow, you just get to the special 2 and throw the special 2. If you are seeing that yellow is going to be the next one, just throw the special 1 while you have it to add a spell, and then deal with getting the special 2 off later. And this can obviously also affect your heavy attack. So that's all to say, this can be a very annoying fight to get started. And if you decided to bring a cosmic champion like Vox or Null or Adam Warlock or somebody like that on your team for this run, I would almost recommend using them instead of Wong, because it's just very difficult to keep track of everything and when you're able to use your heavy and your special. Now let's skip ahead a little bit. You're watching Apocalypse. A little bit later is Hercules. Hercules gets all these annoying protections, and one of the ways to avoid it is to intercept. Now, a great way to intercept is to be unstoppable and to combo into him when he dashes at you with a medium. And as you know, Wong gets lots of unstoppables, especially once you're built up with your blue spells. You get them when he procs the indestructible. So just know that after throwing a heavy charge, you can throw it on your block, let him hit your block while you're unstoppable, and that will count as an intercept to remove the protection. It is a pretty OP strategy to keep the protection down, but this is a long fight and it is difficult to solo due to the strength of those protections. Now next up, Cap Sam. This one, you are just going to have to own it that some of your special ones are going to get auto-blocked. And this is exactly what I was talking about earlier, where basically it's okay to take the chip damage early. Like, you are likely going to throw a special 1, the spell will stick, you'll get hit because he auto-blocked it, and you'll just lose some health, but you'll get it back later. It's still important to build up using your special 1s, and then as much as you can, make sure that the special 2 is unblockable by charging, keeping the unstoppable before throwing it, and then that way, the best way to counter unblockable is, auto block is with unblockable, and that's how you will take care of that. And then finally, Nova, who's the last fight on the path. The one thing you need to think about here is that when you throw unblockable attacks and specials, they will do reduced damage and they will ramp him up. So you want to ramp as you have been in all these other fights, get to your 9 spells, and then the key is do not heavy charge into the special 2. Utilize other ways to gain power so that when you throw the special 2, you're not unstoppable from your Eldritch Energy power gain. You do not want to be unblockable when you throw it. So just throw a vanilla special 2 at the end of a combo and it will basically do full damage and regen everything. Lots of energy damage in this fight, so you're going to be having a ball. Kind of like Arcus, I would start with the green spells so that you can start regenning and building right away off of the energy damage. So anyway, that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully this was helpful if you gave this a full listen and a watch on how to ramp up Wong for this quest. I will be making a partner video to this talking about Chi-Ilth and how Chi-Ilth works in the Necropolis, because for me, she was the other MVP when it came to this challenge. So anyway, hopefully this was helpful. Please share it with your alliance, give me a like and a subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.